You cannot step outside your mind. Why is that? Because all your experiences happen within it. So there's no external reference point?
Introduction. What you are about to hear is a spoken adaptation of a doctoral level philosophy essay. The original version is written in formal academic prose. This version preserves the argument, structure, and conceptual commitments, but has been reworked for visual delivery. Nothing has been simplified into motivational language or popular psychology. The full written essay is available on request. The claim: there is a persistent assumption that underlies almost all thinking, that somewhere, somehow, it is possible to step back, to get outside your own mind and see things as they really are. This assumption appears in different forms. I'm just being objective. I'm looking at the facts. I'm seeing this clearly. Each of these claims relies on the same hidden idea, that there exists a view from nowhere. This essay rejects that idea. You cannot step outside your mind. There is no external vantage point. All access to reality is mediated.
All access to reality is mediated. It's shaped by the constraints of human perception. We can never access reality directly, only through these filters.
What mediation means, to say that all access is mediated, is not to say that reality is unreal. It is to say something more precise. Every encounter with the world is structured by perception, cognition, language, expectation, prior belief. There is no raw interface. There is no unfiltered contact. There is no moment in which the world appears without being shaped by the system encountering it. Even the attempt to remove bias is itself a process carried out within a structure that cannot be removed. Why this is hard to accept. This is resisted for a simple reason: because experience does not feel mediated, it feels direct. It feels like contact present certainty, but that feeling is part of the system. It is not evidence of what lies beyond it. KNT and the limit.
Immanuel Kant formalized this problem with precision. We do not access things as they are in themselves. We access appearances, structured by the conditions of our own cognition.
Immanuel Kant formalized this problem with precision. We do not access things as they are in themselves. We access appearances, phenomena structured by the conditions of our own cognition, space, time, causation. These are not features we discover in reality. They are the forms through which reality becomes intelligible to us. The mistake is to treat these structures as if they belong to the world independently of us. Why this does not solve the problem. Kant identifies the limit, but he leaves us with a dualism. Appearances, what we experience; things in themselves, what we cannot access. This creates a gap that cannot be crossed, and the temptation is always to believe that we can somehow bridge it, that with enough clarity, enough reasoning, enough discipline, we might finally see reality as it is. That temptation is the illusion. You cannot correct from nowhere. Every attempt to correct perception happens from within perception. Every attempt to refine belief happens from within belief. Every attempt to gain clarity is itself mediated by the very system being questioned. You do not step outside your mind to evaluate it. You use your mind to evaluate itself. This is not a flaw, it is a condition. The regress problem. If you try to escape this, you immediately run into regress. To check your perception, you rely on another perception. To verify your reasoning, you use further reasoning. To question your assumptions, you deploy other assumptions. There is no final position outside the system from which it can be judged. There is only recursive refinement within it.
To check your perception, you rely on another perception. To verify your reasoning, you use further reasoning. To question your assumptions, you deploy other assumptions.
The loss of the view from nowhere. The idea of objectivity often depends on the idea that somewhere there exists a neutral perspective. a perspective that is unbiased, unstructured, unmediated. This perspective does not exist. Objectivity is not the absence of perspective. It is the coordination of multiple constrained perspectives under shared methods. It is constructed, not discovered. Merleau-Ponty, an embodiment. Maurice Merleau-Ponty sharpens this further. You are not a detached observer looking out at the world. You are a body already embedded in it. Perception is not a window, it is an activity. You do not stand apart from reality. You are already within the field you are trying to understand. Why this does not lead to relativism. At this point, another mistake appears. If we cannot step outside the mind, then perhaps all perspectives are equal. That does not follow. Constraints still exist. Reality pushes back. Some models predict better, cohere more, survive longer, integrate more data. You cannot access reality directly, but you can build better or worse models of it. Truth is not absolute access. It is constraint-sensitive accuracy within a system. Language as mediation. Language deepens the problem.
Language deepens the problem. You do not think in raw concepts. You think through linguistic structures that categorize, simplify, and stabilize.
You do not think in raw concepts. You think through linguistic structures that categorize, simplify, stabilize. Words are not neutral labels. They shape what can be thought. To describe something is already to frame it, which means even your attempt to describe reality is structured before it begins. The self as mediation. The self does not escape this. The I that seems to stand behind thought is itself constructed, stabilized, maintained. You do not step outside your mind, and there is no stable entity inside it that could do so. The observer is part of the system, not separate from it. So, what remains if the external vantage point is gone? Not nihilism, not collapse, but a shift. You stop asking, what is reality in itself? And start asking, what are the conditions under which reality appears to me? You stop searching for absolute certainty and start working with constraint, coherence, and revision. You cannot step outside your mind. There is no external standpoint from which reality can be accessed directly. Every perception, every thought, every belief is mediated, not optionally, structurally. This does not trap you, but it does remove a certain illusion, the illusion that somewhere there is a final, unmediated view. There isn't. There is only perspective, structure, constraint, and refinement within them, the loss of outside. But this conclusion has not yet been taken seriously enough, because most people hear this and translate it into something softer. Yes, perception is mediated, but we can get closer to reality. That formulation still assumes something crucial, that there is a direction toward which you are moving, a final alignment, a point where mediation thins out and reality comes through. That point does not exist. There is no thinning. There is no final correction. There is no moment where the system stops interpreting and begins seeing. Linked to predictive perception. Your perception is not a window, it is a model. As established previously, you do not see the world, you predict it. The brain generates expectations, and reality only appears as correction, which means even your most accurate perception is still prediction, still structured, still filtered, still shaped before it arrives. So when you attempt to step outside your mind, what are you actually doing? You are using one prediction to evaluate another prediction within a system that never stops predicting. There is no outside, there is only model adjusting model, the collapse of the real world intuition. At this point, something breaks, because the ordinary picture depends on this, that there is a real world you are gradually approaching. But under this model, you are not approaching the world. You are stabilizing predictions that survive contact with it. You do not move closer to reality. You become better at not being wrong in ways that matter. That is a very different thing. What this does to certainty, certainty now becomes suspect, not because everything is false, but because certainty is produced inside the system. It is not a signal from reality. It is a signal from your model saying, this is stable enough, stop questioning, which means the feeling of this is obviously true is not evidence of truth. It is evidence of prediction locking into place.
Your perception is not a window, it is a model. As established previously, you do not see the world. You predict it. The brain generates expectations, and reality only appears as correction.
What this does to the self. Now push it one step further. If perception is predictive, and belief is predictive, and all access is mediated, then the self, the one who is supposedly trapped in this, is also part of the same structure. The one trying to step outside the mind is itself generated by the mind. The observer is not outside the system. The observer is one of its outputs. So when you try to step outside your mind, what you are really doing is one part of the system attempting to take distance from the rest and mistaking that distance for escape. The harder position. This is the harder position. Not you can't fully know reality, but you cannot even occupy a position from which full knowledge would make sense. Not you are limited, but you are structurally embedded in the very thing you are trying to assess. What remains when escape is gone? So what remains when the idea of stepping outside collapses completely? Not despair, but pressure. You are left with no external authority, no neutral standpoint, no final ground, only models, constraints, revisions, and consequences. You cannot verify reality from outside. You can only test your models against resistance. This produces a final shift in how you understand everything. You stop asking, is this the true view of reality? And start asking, what happens if I treat this as true? You stop searching for certainty and start tracking failure, because failure is the only place where reality actually shows up, not as a thing you see, but as something that refuses your prediction. You cannot step outside your mind because there is no outside to step into. There is only a system predicting, correcting, and stabilizing itself against a world it never directly sees. And you are not observing that system. You are what it is doing. This has been a spoken adaptation of a doctoral level essay. The central claim is this: all access to reality is mediated by the structures of perception, cognition, and language. There is no neutral external vantage point. You cannot step outside your mind to see the world as it is in itself. But this does not eliminate truth, it reframes it. Truth becomes a matter of constraint, coherence, and continuous revision, not access without mediation. You do not escape the system, you think within it.